Welcome, Sagittarius, to your in-depth monthly forecast for November 2025. I'm going to share some standout themes to begin with. Then on screen, your event chart right at the beginning of the month. I'll then go through each of the key influences in detail to give you a clear picture of what to look forwards to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell, a very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I have found that 50% of people or more who regularly watch my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please help the channel to continue to thrive and do so now. Please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. My year 2026 Sagittarius deep dive video is now out. You can watch it and gain an insight in what the upcoming year holds for you. Please click on the link beneath this video. So as you come into this month, Sagittarius, you do have Mercury has just moved into Sagittarius. Mercury not at its best in your sign, but is in an electric opposition with Uranus. What's the implication of that? Also, Mars, the planet of passion, is going to join you on the 4th, and you're also going to have Venus, which starts this month in the sign of Libra, moving into a part of your situation which is very reflective on the 6th. What's the implications for your love life? But just to say, Venus does burst into your sign on the 30th. We have two lunations this month. The 5th, the full moon, the 20th, the new moon. But on the 22nd, the sun plays catch up with Mars into your sign. Mercury does leave your sign on the 19th, inverting into the sign of Scorpio. The reason for that is it goes into a retrograde on the 9th. I'll share all about that for you. And Jupiter, your ruler, also begins its annual 4-month retrograde on the 11th. Is that going to be unlucky for you? I don't believe it will be. I also believe that Mercury retrograde can have its benefits. It could have some challenges, but Mercury retrograde will end on the 29th of the month, and critically Saturn, which has been in retrograde since the 11th of July, ends his retrograde on the 28th. So that's a bit of an overview of some of the key themes. So just before I share your chart on the screen at the start of the month, if you've yet to order your unique personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now and get the rest of this year free. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which gives searing insights into the patterns that are played out in your life journey so far and how you can use a greater knowledge of that to steer your future moves along with those forecast transits. And you'll get your free gift of your general love and Chinese and Indian written forecasts for the year ahead, but the overall package is 30% off. Please see below for more. On the screen now, I'm sharing your event chart. Obviously, the planet that's in our sign is really important. So there's Mercury. Why doesn't Mercury like being in Sagittarius? Well, intriguingly, Mercury has been in Sagittarius at the start of the last 2 years as we've gone into the new year, and it will be at the end of this year. And the reason is, of course, because of that retrograde on the 9th. But Mercury is said to be detrimented in Sagittarius. You have an appreciation of the big picture. You know, you can have the flair, the panache, and buccaneering spirit. And Mercury is more about details or quick communication. So sometimes perhaps there may be a tendency to rush things, find those details a little boring. But that opposition with Uranus at the start of the month suggests that your unique way of looking at things could connect you to someone, and they're both linking back to Pluto. So a conversation that you initiate at the start of this month could be really intriguing. But if we think about the sun, the luminary, and the moon, the second luminary, they are very watery and psychological at the start of this month for you. So as much as Mercury is in your sign, may give you an opportunity to dazzle people with your flair and ideas, especially where you're doing something different and fresh. You're really being urged by the planets to be in touch with the things that are not so obvious, so the more subterranean parts of life. And that, for most of us, is very much to do with emotion. And if you look at the Sun and Mars are in house 12, so that has an echo of Pisces, and it can be to do with where we withdraw a little bit, recharge, become much more conscious of a need for rest and healing. You can see your ruler Jupiter is in house 8. That can be about where we're deeply devoted, but it can also be about transformations. Jupiter here can be about money, but also shared resources and also business. And then Saturn and Neptune are in your 4th house. And of course, Saturn over the last couple of years and Neptune since 2012 full time, apart from whence it's been in the sign of Aries from the end of March, if you remember, for its brief sojourn into the sign of Aries. They have really been asking you over the last couple of years in particular, along with the North Node, to get more in touch with how you feel about things. Now, if you're a Sagittarius that's gone with the flow on that, perhaps you have got some Scorpio in your natal chart, you may have embraced that challenge that Saturn can lay down to be more attuned to where you live, how you live there, and who with. Anything to do with security, physical or emotional, family strands, your deep past, the roots of your life experience, your environment in terms of your senses. Atmospheres are important. We can ignore them at our peril, And the 4th house is very much to do with family matters too. So there's a psychological dimension at the start of this month, but it doesn't mean to say it's bad, because the Sun links brilliantly to the Moon, and Mars, Jupiter, Saturn and Neptune are also in a grand water trine. So if you're up for tuning in, that can be very helpful to you. But look at the position of Venus. Venus is very friendly. It's at home in Libra, domicile, but it's not in a very good position with Saturn. It's in a quincunx. So if there are certain friendships or connections you have where it doesn't feel atmospherically very comfortable, or you're not quite sure if you can really trust people, or there is a relationship where things have got a bit heavy, I think that opposition between Mercury and Uranus can just remind you that you do have a right to assert what you need to be your authentic, honest, direct and very engaging self. But if you are able to be at peace with just processing vulnerabilities, fears, concerns, not judging it, just observing it, I think that's very, very helpful to you as you come into this month. But on the 4th, so I'm going to now share with you the details. On the 4th, Mars arrives in your sign. And over the last 6 or 7 weeks, Mars has been going through your 12th house. And Mars in the 12th house is challenging. It has a tendency, because Mars can be about anger, the 12th house can be psychological. I believe that emotions get locked into our organs from past upset and trauma. And there may have been times over the last 6 or 7 weeks when your emotions may have been surprisingly up and down. At times you may have felt very angry, but not quite known why. At other times deeply emotional. Or someone may have discussed something you found quite triggering. But Mars moving into your sign is a terrific start to this month, but he does immediately go face to face with Uranus. So that electric energy of Mercury and Uranus is repeated, but in a much more physical way, because Mars in our own sign is about moving into the moment, coming into the present, and it will give you a big increase in physical energy. And with Uranus opposite, you might want to do something with it, and you might want to do something suddenly, because there is that part of you that loves drama, loves doing things, off the cuff, spontaneously, bringing variety and colour, texture into your life. That's what makes you such a fun person to be around. So that's possible with that. But on the 5th, the full moon, is in Taurus. The moon likes being in Taurus, it's exalted here, but the sun's in your 12th house. But they are linking to the node in your 4th house. At work, or balancing your emotional, psychological and physical health, the sun, with the practical side of life and therefore your physical energy, if something has been out of kilter and you need to make some changes, it could come up over the next 2 weeks. But the node is very helpful if you're open to tuning into those feelings. But on the 6th, Venus does move into your 12th house and it does go square Pluto. If that full moon reveals something around a relationship, because the moon in Taurus and the sun in Scorpio can be very much to do with attachments, of course desire, and with Venus moving into Scorpio where it's not its best location, it's detrimented, and squaring off to Pluto in your 3rd house, if there's something around any relationship that isn't quite right, a conversation could reveal something that shares a mystery or a secret in a way which could be a little bit challenging. But because you can be very forthright, I think there's a part of you that might think that even if something's difficult to hear, it's better out in the open. On the 8th, Uranus returns to Taurus, where of course it had been for around about 7 years now. Not a great location for Uranus at all. But for you, has brought disruption around your routines. It may have been difficult to get into any kind of pattern, whether it's with sleep, whether it's with obligations and commitments. It all may have felt a bit scrambled at times. There could be a little bit more of that, unfortunately, through to the end of April when it returns back to the sign of Gemini. But equally, all that you've learned about your need for things to be fresh and varied, because Sagittarius people don't really like dreadful, dull routines. So maybe if you're not still quite living your life exactly on your terms, that Uranus transit through to the end of April gives you a chance to address that. The 9th, however, does see Mercury go retrograde in your sign, but just know it has been in its shadow since the 21st, the pre-retrograde shadow. So if there is something that hasn't been travelling quite at the speed of light, that explains that, and maybe there is something you do need to rethink. But it's your ruler going retrograde on the 11th, which is particularly significant because it's inverting through 10 degrees through to March the 11th, and it is around shared resources, finances, investments, can be about intimacy, the 8th house. When Jupiter slows down, it's not normally great, but what I like about this particular retrograde is because Jupiter is angling towards Saturn all through this month, and they were on really bad terms for a year and a half, and that's only relatively recently diminished. They're actually on very constructive terms at the start of this month with Mars and Neptune in the mix, and towards the end of this month it's going to be Venus, which is significant in the mix. So just know, if you're up for tuning in to that more emotional dimension and using Jupiter's rulership of Pisces, not your sign, its traditional rulership of that sign is much more about using knowledge to heighten our perceptions and understanding of the psychological domain and anything to do with spirituality. So, I think you can work with this retrograde. The 12th, however, does see Mercury in its retrograde come into an exact conjunction with the advancing Mars in your sign. If the Mercury retrograde is creating some blockages, some cosmic road blockages, you might find yourself getting rather exasperated at the heart of this month. You can get through it, Sagittarius. You may have to use your usual creativity, and know your great strength is actually your flexibility, because you're a mutable sign. How about that? You have the passion of the fire, but you're not stuck. You can evolve, and that's a great gift to have. But Mercury for sure does invert back into your 12th house on the 19th. through to the 29th when it comes out of the retrograde, and it comes out of the post-retrograde shadow on the 17th of December. But what I would say to you is that Mercury retrograde in the 12th house is a bit tougher. There may be something that you're needing to rethink with Mercury's retrograde, and it may initially be about an idea, but then it might feel more that the blockage is more to do with some fears, some anxieties. Perhaps the way you're thinking about things might be a little bit more negative than ordinarily would be the case. But if you do need to talk something through, it could actually prove to be very valuable, and the new moon of the 20th in Scorpio gives you a chance to embrace that. Now, 12th house new moons and the moon in Scorpio, where it's in its fall, is not usually a bunch of cosmic laughs, but this one does link brilliantly with Jupiter, your ruler, and the strict Saturn. So if you're open, as I mentioned at the start of this, to that more emotional dimension, the feelings dimension, and not just focusing on the next exciting, bold, adventurous thing you can do, dusting yourself down and saying, well, that didn't go to plan, I had a few dates with someone, it didn't work out, I'll find someone else to go out with. That redoubtable spirit is one of your greatest qualities, but it can see, in my humble opinion, Sagittarius people offsetting bits and pieces of not completely worked out emotion, which can then build up like a residue, a silt within our beings. And I think that this is a new moon that can help you to flush that out over the next month, or at least work on some of the things. And that could come from watching some videos, thinking very carefully, doing some meditations. Mindfulness is the buzzword, isn't it? That's all possible. And that deep reflection and healing can call out to you, but it would be a good time, if you've ever thought about talking to someone more formally, to embrace with a life coach, with a counsellor of some kind, maybe a therapist, could be very, very helpful to you on that new moon. But then the sun switches into Sagittarius. You're going to come into the moment, and it's going to be quite dramatic how quickly things shift. Also on the 28th, Saturn ends its very, very challenging retrograde for you since the 1st of September in Pisces, where you may have felt like you were walking through a field of glue around certain emotional, home or family strands. But also Venus then forges the grand water trine with Saturn, now at a retrograde, and Jupiter. So again, if you're up for processing, for example, if there was a past relationship that caused pain, or you bring a relationship to a close that isn't working for you during this month, with Mercury going direct on the 29th, but Venus crucially arriving in your sign on the 30th, joining up with the Sun and also with Mars, how good is that? So as you come to the end of this month, if you've really done the work, you can do a lot of releasing, perhaps steering your energy and commitment towards people who are more in tune with you intuitively, and steering away from people who may in the past have been great fun and enjoyable to be with, but no longer serve your greater good. So it's a transitional month, but it's a month which can have its moments of spark, drama, particularly early on with Mercury and Mars opposite Uranus. Venus initially is calling out your friendship desires, but Venus is linked to Saturn. I thought really says whoever you're linking with, particularly around future collaborations, if it doesn't feel right, I wouldn't do it. And then by the end of the month, you'll be moving into your power, and the more you've kind of engaged with that more emotional stuff, the more you can move into your fire, your passion, your assertion, and your ability to initiate things freshly. And by the end of this month, you can be absolutely on top astral form. I hope you have a great November, Sagittarius. If you've yet to watch it, please check out that year 2026 Sagittarius Deep Dive Forecast. All the best and goodbye.